Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. And today's webinar is hosted by the Society of Crop Business Advisors of Kenya. And basically what we'll be talking about is the finance bill in relation to the free trade agreements, and of course, above all, its impact to the agricultural sector in Kenya. And today we have a very able panelist of Winnie Karanja. She's a finance expert, a CPA-K, who is going to delve deeper and just tell us and share with us the highlights of the budget. We also have Lydia Kimani, who is an expert in FTAs and also an expert in CADEP and other agreements. So we'll be able to get to know the impact of this bill in relation to this kind of agreements that are happening across the world in relation to Kenya and its neighbors. We also have Jane Musindi, who is an expert in SPS and various matters across board in the agricultural sector. And we'll get to hear about just a justification and also just a highlight of how this bill is affecting agriculture and its impact on agriculture. So I'm going to give the space to Winnie Karanja to just take us through this presentation. And you're welcome to type in your questions in the Q&A session. Feel free to comment as well and check out also the live broadcast on our Facebook page. Welcome, Winnie.
Thank you, Nekesa. Allow me to share my screen. Let's look at the allocations for today's budget. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Winnie, please proceed.
Looking at today's budget, this is how the budget has been allocated. We have a total of 3.6 billion, and out of that amount, we have 927.7 billion, which is the deficit for the financial year 2021-2022. Let's go to where I've done the percentages. From these calculations, we can see the winners clearly, and we are more interested in agriculture. And we can see the allocation here is 2.4, which we'll be able to see where all these allocation were given to. But before we get into agriculture, we can look at other areas which will really also help or boost agriculture. Like for instance, in the area of infrastructure, which got quite a good percentage. Now, if infrastructure is improved, that means our farmers will be able to get their produce from the farm, get them to the markets, which is a good thing. So infrastructure getting such a percentage is a good thing. We are also Nekesa, are you able to share my screen? I'm having some challenges.
Maybe we can have Ricky who can assist us. Ricky, you can assist us on sharing the screen, please. Maybe Winnie, you can just go into delving deeper into what you've shared as Ricky assists on sharing your presentation, especially on the percentages and what that means to the various sectors. Thank you.
Okay. Ricky, you have my presentation. I've sent it to you. Oh God. Oh, no. So as let's continue as we wait for my screen to be shared. So for agriculture, it's an improvement from the previous financial year, which last year agriculture was allocated 1.97. So getting a 2.4 this year, we can say it's an improvement. We know that agriculture is the backbone of our economy and it's central to achievement of food security. However, it's still one of the least funded sectors in the budget, and it's been happening in the previous year that it's prone to budget cuts during supplementary budget processes. Perhaps due to these cuts, that's why the sector is still stalled in some projects and it has some pending bills. I think we should be able to do better because up to this time, we can still see that water irrigation is still records the highest numbers of stalled projects, but it's because of the little allocations that we usually get when it comes to that. But from this year, we can see that we have 3.3, which to goes specifically to environmental protection, and water and irrigation is part of the 2.4, where we have the whole amount in agriculture. So water and irrigation is there. So from that allocation, 7 billion goes to national agriculture and rural inclusivity projects. We have 1.5 billion which goes to small scale irrigation and value addition. We also have 2.7 billion to Kenya cereal enhancement project. We have 1.8 billion which went to locust response, and the list continues, so we will not dwell so much on that. Um, for agriculture, because of the small budgets that we usually get, we are still over reliant on the donor fundings that we get externally. But we should be able to move from donor funding to self-reliance, given that we are looking at where we should be able to self-sustain for food in our country. So from there, I'm gonna move to the finance bill, and let's see where this money to fund the budget is going to come from. First, we are going to define what a finance bill is. And a finance bill is a legislative bill proposing changes to taxes. The proposals include levies of new taxes, modification of the existing tax structures, or even continuance of the existing tax structures beyond the period approved by the parliament. We have some quite interesting proposals that have been made for the Finance Bill 2021, and some of the proposed amendments appear to be reactions to court cases in which the decision were issued in favor of the taxpayers. For instance, there is a taxation of the export of services, and we know that this has been litigated in a number of cases, and now targeted for amendment to deny taxpayers a refund of input VAT. We also have a proposed introduction of VAT on basic products, and it has been a subject of debate so far, given that it has potential to impact the cost of living, and we'll be looking at that shortly. Just to go over the proposed the proposed changes or amendments with the finance bill. One of them we can look at just briefly, quickly, at the custom measures. We have like finished iron and steel products to be imported at 25%. We have import duty on leather and footwear products at 25%. We have inputs used in textile and apparel sector at 0%. And we also have input duty on furniture at 35%, just to mention a few. Let us look at the value added tax measures that have been proposed on this finance bill. We have VAT of health products and technology to boost health, exemption of VAT on health products. This is to boost the health sector. We also have narrowing down to agriculture. We have bread, which was there was a proposal to get bread from the previously zero rated to standard rated. The measure proposes to delete the supply of ordinary bread from the zero rating schedule. What does this mean? For instance, if this is going to pass, the introduction of this VAT will further increase the price of a 400-gram loaf by approximately 8 shillings, not forgetting that we recently, like a few months ago, we had an increase of 5 shillings on the same after the global wheat prices went up. And the question that is bringing a lot of debate around this issue is that, is this in line with the fundamental right to affordable food? So when you're looking at the introduction of bread to VAT, this will mean that either the burden will be pushed forward to the consumers, and with this depressed economy, then the question is, would they be able to afford this basic commodity? If not, then the manufacturers can do a backward shifting where this tax burden will be, maybe not all of it, but part of it will be pushed back to our farmers, meaning that the manufacturers will want to buy the inputs for the bread at a lower cost, so that they are able to subsidize their production costs, and so that the bread is still affordable to Kenyans. So these are some of the reasons why the introduction of VAT to bread is quite a debate. The next tax measure is on excise duty. The excise duty is tax imposed on goods and services manufactured in Kenya or imported into Kenya. And the area where this wants to be reintroduced, it's for locally manufactured sugar confectionaries. These are sweets and chocolates. And the rate at which this will be done is at 20 shillings per kilogram. That is for local manufacturing, and 200 per kilogram. That is for imported ones. So what does this mean for the local industry? Both locally manufactured and imported sugar confectionery will be subject to excise duty, just that at a different rate. This proposed amendment is going to eliminate competitiveness of the local confectionery against the imported ones, because definitely with the introduction of the excise duty, the retail prices will increase due to the duty cost, and this cost is going to be passed to the final consumers. Well, this is really a reverse to the gains that the government had made in promoting the local food processing and manufacturing sector, because this means now the competition or the power to compete with the imported ones is going to be a little bit tricky because of the increased cost of production as a result of the introduced duty. The the other parts that had some amend proposed tax measures was on income tax measures, and this was to mention a few. It was the removal of limitation for carrying forward of loss. This is under section 15 of the Income Tax Act. There's also management and professional fees under the extractive sector. We also have some proposed tax measures on fees and levies, and this went to import declaration fee. And that's just a summary of the finance bill and the impact in the areas that it's going to be on. And we also have, on a positive note, for agriculture, custom duty for imports within the East African community, the imports that we'll be getting from our neighbors, like that is going to be at 30%, meaning that now finally we can be able to compete competitively with our neighbors, given that their produce will be coming into our country at an custom of 30%. Nekesa, that's all from me. That's basically the highlight of the budget and what it means for agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Winnie, for sharing with us the highlights. Maybe we can continue typing in the questions in the Q&A chat box, just so that we can take them after the presentations and the discussions around the finance bill today. So just looking at the Big Four agenda, and this paves way to Jen Musindi. When we're looking at the Big Four agenda, you're looking at the conducive environment for business and investment, infrastructure development for inclusive growth. We've seen quite a bit of money allocated to digitization in terms of the Konza cities and the likes of those, to ensure that we're actually growing in ICT. We've seen a lot of funds also allocated to rail and ports construction, and we've actually seen an improvement in terms of the railway. Right now, there's a lot of, transportation via rail across the country. What exactly does this mean to the normal Kenyan when we are looking at the budget? What is the impact of all this on agriculture? Looking at also the sustained investment on social services for the welfare of Kenyans, and also finally the fourth Big Four agenda in terms of continued support to counties for enhanced service delivery. Jen Musindi.
Thank you, Nekesa. If I look generally at how he allocated the money towards the Big Four, most of it has actually gone into agriculture, 60 billion into food and nutrition security for all Kenyans. And before I go to your specific question, I'd just like to mention that most of this 60 billion, 7 billion has actually gone into the National Agriculture and Rural Inclusivity Project, NARIC, which has been there since last year, I believe, and it's I think it is funded through the World Bank. The beauty of the allocating resources to this NARIC program is that it is active in 21 counties, and it is targeting for products to improve production in 4 products. This is avocado, dairy, what else? Avocado, dairy, Irish potato, and poultry. The beauty of that is that looking at the fact that we are now going into the FTAs, the EAC trade agreement, and the Africa Continental, if we empower our farmers to produce more, because part of the problem was we have not developed our rural, our local industry enough for us to compete properly on the regional and international space. We always look at horticulture as a success, but horticulture is just one product. We need to expand it, and so I'm happy that he allocated quite a bit to the NARIC program. Now, specifically to what you asked, you see, COVID has taught us that if we don't improve our infrastructure, then we will not survive shocks to our economy. So a lot of products have gone on to being marketed online. So allocating some budget onto developing ICT will help online marketing. The rail transport, with what we've seen with the mess that happens on the roads when there's a little disruption, the traffic, if we moved all these trucks onto rail, then it would help. So allocating money to the ports and the rail system will also help. Even for people transport, not only goods, but for agriculture, we are looking specifically at goods transport. So again, it will be more efficient. We expect that it will land at our purchasing point a little cheaper. We are yet to see the full implication of all this. So I think this budget is actually, if it passes and the funds that are allocated are used for what they're supposed to be used for, then yes, it will actually revolutionize a lot of the rural areas, because it's opening up a lot of areas that were not previously open. Thanks, Nekesa.
Thank you, Jen. And I think that's a very powerful point, especially on infrastructure and the need to actually ensure we have proper infrastructure for the growth and impact on agricultural goods, and also the services that we are giving to the society and in Kenya in general, and also opening up Kenya to the world. Without proper infrastructure, then we close ourselves to business. So just looking at the whole finance bill, who are the winners and who are the losers in this whole bill, in case it gets through and it's implemented in the right way? Who are the winners and the losers? And also looking at it in relation to the free trade agreements, what is your general overview? And this question goes out to Lydia. What is your general overview in terms of this bill and its impact on our trade and regional trade and the free trade agreements? Lydia?
Thanks, Nekesa. And yes, I'd like to request that that slide remains like that. Yes, so to begin with, the winners are, from the percentages, are very evident, is energy, infrastructure, and ICT. We also have a close second. I think what I would say is we have health. And we all know that perennially, I think health has also received very minimal allocation, and this has been elevated because of the pandemic. So in a dark way, maybe we would be grateful that now health has been prioritized because of the pandemic. We also see environment protection, and that is a very strong statement. Just by looking at those percentages, that is a very strong statement. So the losers, I think economic and commercial affairs is a great loser, and this should make the agriculture sector quite sad, because this is where we have a lot of the free trade agreements being negotiated. So what that translates to is the fact that our trade officials do not have sufficient allocation. First of all, if there are capacity gaps in terms of their capacity to negotiate, then there is no sufficient allocation to bolster their capacities in terms of technical expertise to negotiate to a point where we have an agreement that favors our national interests. Again, you find that at 0.6%, with free trade agreements, we have numerous rounds of negotiations. These involve traveling to and from the negotiating countries. So you realize, I'll give a case in point here, the US FTA. An air ticket, even for you as a tourist, or even on as a tourist to the US, costs an arm and a leg. So you imagine that if, for example, you have to have a conservative 5 rounds of negotiations, and you can imagine that it will be, normally we will have the officials traveling to the US. So you can imagine even the cost of living in the US, sustaining our trade negotiators there, comes at a price. But when we allocate 0.6% for us in the agriculture sector, which becomes one of the sectors that is highly targeted in trade negotiations, then we are likely to lose, because first of all, we have denied our strongest warriors on this war front, the ammunition, the equipment, or the arsenal to actually, as in, wage a successful war, if I may put it in very dramatic terms. So we need to reconsider that, and as the agriculture sector, we need to strengthen our front. And you realize aspects of issues like market access. We have being negotiated in terms of compliance, ability to even understand basic instruments of trade like the WTO negotiations. They are very, very elaborate, and it takes quite a bit of investment, even at a country level. I'll give a case in point of China. When they ascended to the WTO, they made an investment of training close to 800 lawyers who became experts And we can now see the investment that went into those lawyers. They have turned around the economy. They have moved from just being an obscure nation, developing country that is grappling with tons of inequality, many people who are poor, to now becoming the strongest, the largest economy in the world. So we can see some of those kinds, the impact that these kinds of allocations have with regard to even for us as a sector. So that is something that the agriculture sector needs to pay very close attention to. Another winner is social protection, culture, and recreation. So social protection here means the ability to have pension when you retire, access to healthcare at an affordable subsidized rate. So when it is at 2%, what are we exactly saying? And then we can already see the impact that we are largely an informal economy. So meaning a lot of people are not able to even pay for the basic NHIF, NSSF. So what does that mean ultimately is that in the long term, the country is going to really grapple with supporting hundreds, millions upon millions of dependents who could not save for their retirement. So it's important that we start looking at what are the labor incentivizing policies that are going to help transition from that informal economy to the formal. Then we can bolster and strengthen the social protection angle. So this could also mean that we also have very little support to conduct sensitization at a country level to this informal economy and let them appreciate the benefit of having social protection, not just in the here and now, but in the future. So we have another. I think those are some of the ones that. Oh yes, another winner is education. But at this point, we would like to ask, what is the quality of education that we are giving, that is being provided? Because you find that for an economy that is very heavy labor intensive like ourselves, then we need to improve the quality of education so that ultimately we are able to promote a culture of entrepreneurship. So even as we allocate 16.6 to education, for us in the agriculture sector, we are asking, to what level does this education, for example, benefit women? Because women from the ASTGS, you're told, are actually the backbone of the production in agriculture. But to what extent are these women able to access information and education that allows them now, for example, to understand the importance of basic compliance to sanitary and phytosanitary measures, which are very critical in accessing international markets? So these are some of the, and even for us as extension service providers, this is a critical aspect, because the more people are able to access education, the easier it becomes for them to appreciate our work as extension service providers. But for as long as the education sector and the quality is not at par, then it continues to become a liability. So aside from just looking at the winners and losers, I think we need to go a step further and interrogate what is the return on investment. Because yes, we can assign 4% and 2% and 12.6%, for example, in the energy and infrastructure, ICT. But again, being an informal economy, in the agriculture sector, we have a lot of women doing the production. To what extent does this ICT, being able to trade online, benefit them? So you can already see that they are literally, in terms of literacy, there's a big challenge, meaning that even when there's an online platform, it will also be a barrier to trade because they lack the access. So even when the Continental Free Trade Agreement opens up markets like Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, this lady is not able, first of all, to have the basic understanding of what this AFCFTA means. Then secondly, even if there are online platforms or solutions like the STR, the Simplified Trade Regime of COMESA, so that is supposed to support women traders to comfortably trade across borders, then you find that it becomes an additional barrier. So we need to be very objective, and we need to interrogate these processes and ensure that when we invest in energy and infrastructure, it doesn't go to serve a limited percentage, but it actually goes to serve the larger majority of the Kenyans. So in closing, one of the interesting chapters in free trade agreements is the investment chapter. And you find that our government is so the investment chapter is where we have a lot of foreign direct investments flowing in. And I'll just give an example, and then you will be the judge of it. So for example, the provisions of EPZ in Kenya, to begin with, you are granted a 10-year corporate tax holiday. Then after the 10 years corporate tax holiday, you are allowed 25% corporate tax. So you remember that in Kenya, corporations pay 30%. So already you have had a 10-year corporate tax holiday. This is followed by a 25% corporate tax holiday thereafter. Then the EPZ are the beneficiaries of modern logistics. So again, you see where that infrastructure is headed. Energy infrastructure, ICT. Aside from that, there is also custom duty exemptions for construction of raw and also raw materials. So again, we go back and ask ourselves, if this is what we are giving foreign direct investors, so you already see that they have been exempted from paying taxes for 10 years. So assuming that the foreign direct investor through the US FTA is coming into the country to set up a shop versus a domestic direct investor. So this person, in addition to having access to lower, cheaper credit that is at 3-4% interest rate versus 18, 14, 15% in Kenya, they have an additional 10-year corporate tax holiday. Just this year, there was a proposal to introduce a minimum tax to all businesses in the country. Hold that thought. Then after this, in addition to this, the foreign direct investor has access to modern logistics and infrastructure. This is contrasted to our domestic direct investor. In the agriculture sector, this will be our smallholder farmers. How many smallholder farmers have decent access roads from their farms into the marketplaces? We have made significant progress that we do not dispute. But how many other bottlenecks are they facing? This recent week, we have seen the introduction of several regulations, the potato, the livestock bill, and we now have the mung bean. All those regulations have an embedded levy. But we need to ask ourselves, these levies are being introduced because the government is having shortfalls, and now they have to make up for these shortfalls. But instead of getting them from the wealthier foreign direct investors, we are continuing to choke our domestic direct investors with these kinds of levies. Aside from that, the foreign direct investor will be coming, has full knowledge and utility of modern logistics and infrastructure. This is contrasted to our smallholder farmers. How many of them are digitally literate? How many of them are able to make use of even the internet to get their produce to the next level? These are the questions that we should be asking. And in UNCTAD 2016, one of the things that countries were being encouraged by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development is that the same incentives that you are quickly willing to give foreign direct investors, how about if you turn around and extend the same to domestic direct investors? Then this way, we could start looking at preventing the economy from hemorrhaging a lot of resources in terms of lost revenue, because through free trade agreements, one of the things governments push is the removal of duties for imports coming into the host country, like what the US had proposed. So if the commodities are coming in duty free, the government loses import duty. Again, a lot of free trade agreements encourage the removal of export taxes. The ASTGS encourages value addition as one of its anchor, as one of its pillars for transformation. So if we remove export taxes, by extension, what we are saying is that we will continue to sell or export raw material or primary produce, which does not fetch as much money in the export market compared to processed goods. In addition, primary commodities tend to attract non-tariff barriers as opposed to processed or manufactured goods. So this is food for thought. And then finally, we also have, once, of course, like I had indicated earlier, the foreign direct investors set up shop in the country. We have the loss of customs duty because they are allowed to bring in material without paying duty. And even in some instances, as they export, they are facilitated. So we need to ask ourselves, this lost income, who is compensating for it? And how are we making it up? Could it be that perhaps we are hoping that even as we entice foreign direct investors, we are hoping that our domestic investors are going to compensate? So we need to be very careful that even as we rush and we appreciate, as the members of the WTO, we are proponents of free trade. But at the same time, it needs to be free trade that is in the best interest of the country. Thank you very much, Nekesa.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for your for just looking at how the finance bill will impact on the free trade agreements, and actually the long-term, maybe the long-term effect it might have on our economy. And that brings in just one question. I see already we have a question in the Q&A section, but I'll get back to that as soon as I finish this question to Winnie. When we are talking about self-financing, because we have a deficit, obviously, from the budget, from the bill. There's definitely a deficit. And looking at the financing, how the government is going to obtain financing for these various sectors that they have allocated, do you think that self-financing, especially in terms of taxation, increasing basic goods, things like bread, this is what the common mwananchi eats, do you think that this is really a sustainable way of doing things as a country, increasing these taxes on various goods, and also just looking at who is actually the loser in this in terms of the BOPs? Do you think that this is sustainable, Winnie? Is Winnie online?
Hi, Nekesa. Could you please ask the question again?
Yeah, I'm just looking at what Lydia has said in terms of financing our current bill. And we are looking at a lot on taxation of goods, excise duty on several items, just to ensure that we are meeting the current budget. So do you think that this is sustainable when it comes to self-financing, taxing even the basic commodities like bread to ensure that we are financing the current proposed budget?
Thank you, Nekesa. I don't think we are really being realistic, especially when we go to tax basic commodities. Like, for instance, how do we expect, with everything that is happening right now, with the pandemic, with people losing their jobs, and then we are going to tax what people are using every day, the basic commodities? Well, it's an advantage to the government because, of course, like something like bread, people buy it every day. So, of course, the income is going to trickle in. But what is the impact? We are basically worsening off the consumer. So we can do other things. We can widen the tax bracket, but not adding a burden to the people who are already carrying the burden. Why don't the government look for other ways to tax other than getting to the basic commodities that the common mwananchi is using every day? We have other options, and for me, taxing something like bread would just worsen off the position that we are currently in. And I think maybe that's why we have also had conversations around um, adding the borrowing ceiling so that we can be able to borrow more to finance the deficit that we have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Winnie. And I think looking at even when we check online how our government is performing in terms of the deficits and in terms of the balance of trade, then you see that we already have a negative, a really big negative. So it might not really be impactful if we are looking at taxing the common mwananchi to just finance the current budget. But then just looking at the 2.4% of the kitty, and this is a question from Howard Mugera. The 2.4% of the kitty has been allocated to our sector, in contrast to the 2013 Maputo Declaration, which is supposed to be 10%. What does that mean for the evolution of agriculture? Isn't it hypocrisy for the government to champion agriculture as a pillar in the Big Four agenda? How do we visualize these reforms? Just looking at the bill, we are looking at tea, coffee sectors to take root under such stringent circumstances. How do we ensure that we are increasing this percentage? Because 2.4 really split among the ministries of agriculture, the various sections of the Ministry of Agriculture might not really be impactful. Looking at even research and development, for example. And this is a question that probably Jen can take and also Lydia can add in. Thank you.
Thanks, Nekesa. If you look, the allocation for 2.4% is actually an improvement from last year's 1.9%. And from what we can see, the government is in a very difficult position. They don't know, they have a huge budget, and where that money will come from is also a question, I believe, in their minds. But if you look at their proposals, they are planning to tax us even more. But at 2.4%, yes, it's not enough. But I'm not sure they can do anything better with the resources they have, unless now we as citizens want to give them more. That is one thing. The other thing is, I believe if you look at their strategy, the ASTGS, they are leveraging a lot on private sector support. So I believe they are looking at what they can give is 2.4, but they're looking at, I'm sure, like for the minister mentioned that there will be enhancing partnerships in the livestock sector for the free disease zones. So they're leveraging a lot on private sector partnerships. So for them, they can give 2.4, but maybe private sector, if they can be enticed with some goodies, they would want to participate even better and help them out, with a little more resource. And then in addition to that, if you look at what they've put down as allocation to the economic recovery strategy, they've actually, there's 23.1 billion that has been allocated for economic recovery. And of that 23.1 billion, there's some addition of agriculture. I think, what was it? 1.9 billion improving agriculture and food security. What that means, we are yet to understand. Then there's also 2.6 to enhance liquidity in business. So this one, I believe they were mentioning that they will give credit guarantees so that to improve credit access by MSMEs. So I think they're trying, but they're not doing enough. We know they're not doing enough. We will keep pushing them to look at agriculture better, but I believe they're in a very tight position. Nekesa.
Lydia, anything to add on that?
Yes, Nekesa. So my proposal would be, yes, it is. Hello?
1 minute for you.
Okay, I'll try. So one of the things that I'll say, yes, it's embarrassing to say it is a leading sector, but a reason that has constantly been given by the National Treasury is that agriculture is one of the least contributors to revenue collection. So just as a prudent business person would do, you only invest where there is a return on investment. So as a private sector, we need to build a business case for investment in agriculture, the return on investment. One of the ways my proposal would be is that the 23 billion for starters be assigned to setting up cooperatives for smallholder farmers. And this is going to build resilience in terms of economic resilience, because we'll be able to spread the cost if it is of investment, and even the return on investment is higher when they are a cooperative, and even the multiplier effect on the economy is higher that way. So we find that a lot of countries like the US, They subsidized their farmers heavily last year during the COVID pandemic through stimulus packages. While we appreciate what the government did for the agriculture sector, a lot of these stimulus packages channeled to the horticulture sector. And a good reason is because the horticulture sector is well organized. So a key takeaway from that should be that going forward, we need to fast track the process of formalizing the smallholder farmers into commercially oriented cooperatives that now can be able to access some of these stimulus packages. Then finally, the other thing would be that government invests in labor-intensive sectors such as agriculture. So one of the things is that while we appreciate that we want to do the transition and into a more industrialized economy, we need to appreciate the informality again of our economy. So we need to start appreciating that we have a lot of, we are labor intensive as opposed to being capital intensive. So our allocation, our investment should focus on utilizing this kind of resource, the human resource. And then by that, we also now become an attractive sector that the government could consider increasing allocation going forward.
Thank you so much, Lydia. And as we wind up this evening, what are the key take homes? And this is just what are your thoughts around the finance bill in relation to the free trade agreement? Just one key point that you'd like the audience to take home today. We can start with Winnie, then Jen, and then Lydia.
For me, Nekesa, the most important thing would be to participate. When these bills are being drafted, when they are brought to the public so that we can give suggestions, we should be able to participate and not only be out here making suggestions where they are not required to be. Like, for instance, there's where you should upload your comments. Don't just put it on your social media page and assume that is enough. Don't just discuss that with your friend and assume. Even for other bills, we have seen, even with the livestock bill, we are just talking outside here, but when it comes to the real action, are we really passing this information to the people who are supposed to have it so that it can be tabled to the parliament? And these discussions that we're having and the debates and the complaints, are they really reaching to the people who are in charge? So basic thing, every point that you want to be in that particular bill, it doesn't have to be the finance bill. Any bill that is being drafted by the government, take part, participate, and make sure that your voice have been heard. That's all.
Nekesa, my take home would be there's a lot that is emphasized on the private-public partnerships. For the business people listening to us now, let us look at where we can plug in. There's a lot of support that from the government that where the private sector can be supported to participate in a lot of these projects. And we need to take advantage of the environment and really enhance our businesses. We need to study this finance bill. And as Winnie said, we need to also be very proactive. We don't know yet, these were proposals, so we don't know yet the exact the way that this money will be used. So in as much as we shall listen to the we have listened to the minister speaking and he has given us his proposals. We have to make sure then it is used for what it was supposed to be used for. The more noise you make, the government tends to channel money where the noise is so that the noise is reduced. So we need to keep that in mind. Thanks, Nekesa.
Lydia?
Apologies for that. So my take home would be that I think it is time for organizations like SOCA to bring these kinds of conversations to the people who need it most. and not just bring it, but break it down to the level that they're able to understand and also share and give input to these kinds of processes. So I think, and then in addition to that, we are able now to even provide an objective counter to what the government is offering in our evidence-based submissions. Are we able to, for example, conduct studies and give projections like the way the Parliamentary Budget Office does? And they have actually allowed stakeholders to use that information for their advocacy processes. So I think this is very commendable for SOCA to be breaking new ground on in terms of unpacking these kinds of processes and ensuring that information gets to everyone. One of the challenges has been that the information asymmetries. Information is available, but it is not being unpacked and interpreted in a way that supports the public participation that is provided for. So thank you very much. It was a very enriching process.
Thank you so much, Lydia. And we thank all our audience for participating in today's discussion. And we will be delving deeper into part 2 of this. So we will definitely look at agriculture in details. So looking forward to next Thursday. We hope that you can all tune in. In this discussion. Thank you.